So let's talk about the top 100 plants. We have a website called top100plants.com. Let's talk about what all that means. What's the big deal? So what are the top 100 plants? The top 100 plants are the plants that best feed wildlife. So we'll be talking about the food chain. We'll be talking specifically about North America. But the top 10 plants are the plants that best feed wildlife. And it's a whole food chain thing. Start off with herbivores and go to carnivores, etc. But we're dealing top 100 plants are the ones that best support wildlife, starting with the herbivores. But how do the top 100 plants feed wildlife? Well, we'll be talking about leaf-eating insects because, yes, leaf-eating insects are herbivores, but they're a particular kind of herbivore that's very specialized. And by specialized, we mean that leaf-eating insects usually focus on one or a very few types of plants to get their food. So, for an example, this is for my geographic area of Louisville, Kentucky. If you live in the eastern half of the United States, it's going to be very similar unless you're very far south like Florida. But the top 5 plants in my geographic area are oak trees, native plum and cherry trees, native willow trees, birch trees, native maple trees. A couple of observations here. Each one of these groups is a genus. Sometimes I avoid that word because it can be a little bit clunky, but the plural of genus is genera. So these are the top 5 genera of plants. So each of the top 100, we're talking about 100 genera of plants. So oak trees. Now, another observation, native plum and cherry trees. There are non-native cherry trees. It's important to choose the native ones. There are non-native willows, such as the weeping willow. It's important instead to choose native willow trees. And the same with maple. There's a non-native called Norway maple that's very invasive. It should be avoided. So we're talking about native maple trees, such as sugar maple or silver maple, also known as water maple. So that's a little bit more detail than we need right now, but I wanted to give you some examples of the top 5 out of the top 100. So let's talk about food chains. We learned in school that food chains start with, the plant. There's the plant, and then there's the herbivore, and then there's the carnivore, and then there's the decomposers. To understand the top 100 plants, we need to drill down a little bit into the herbivores, because we need to look at different types of insects, because some insects are carnivorous, some insects are decomposers, some insects are herbivores, and herbivores are divided up roughly into those that eat leaves, those that eat wood, and those that eat blooms, in other words, the pollinators. So the top 100, out of all those groups I just named, the top 100 plants are the ones that best support the leaf-eating insects, because leaf-eating insects are very specialized. Now, herbivorous insects are specialized. Now, I wrote this down. I almost put a question mark by it. Are herbivorous insects specialized? Really, pollinators are not that specialized because plants want their blooms to be eaten. They want insects, bees and butterflies, to come along and drink the nectar and get the pollen stuck on their legs and their bodies so that they then fly to the next plant and fertilize. That's what pollination is. It's a fertilization process. So herbivorous insects are specialized up to a point, but leaf-eating insects are very specialized. The reason for this is that plants don't want their leaves to be eaten. The leaf is a power plant. It's a factory of power. The leaf is where photosynthesis takes place. So the sun shines on the leaves, and the leaves produce sugar and other compounds from the process of photosynthesis, and so that's what occurs. But leaf-eating insects are very specialized in that. So that's why plants don't want their leaves to be eaten, and in order to ward off herbivores like you and me, you and I can't just go up to a tree or a plant and grab a leaf and eat it. It usually tastes sour. It tastes sour because it has chemicals in it that that ward off herbivores. Therefore, leaf-eating insects such as caterpillars, now all butterflies and moths start off as caterpillars, so the leaf-eating caterpillars are leaf-eating insects. They're very specialized. Some insects can only eat oaks, some can only eat cherries, and so on down the line. And what we've done in America in the last 500 years is we've cleared the landscape of this variety of plants that existed before now. So we need to replace that variety so that we can then have a variety of leaf-eating insects and on up the food chain. So plants don't want their leaves to be eaten. I've already shared this, but take cherry, for example. Cherry and plums, their leaves contain cyanide, so plants are deadly serious about their leaves not being eaten. The leaves of tomato and tobacco contain nicotine because that's a toxin that's going to make most herbivores go away and not eat it. So plants don't want their leaves to be eaten, and it takes eons for leaf-eating insects to evolve so that they have the physiology in order to be able to ingest or eat leaves, and that doesn't change quickly. We have changed the landscape very quickly. The last 500 years is only the blink of an eye in time, and so and the insects, the leaf-eating insects have not been able to adapt to that, so they have died off. And what else has died off is the many animals that eat leaf-eating insects. So we need to replace the native plants that we have removed from the landscape. So wildlife is declining. As a result of all the phenomena I just shared with you, wildlife is declining. We've cleared the landscape of the native plants. Now, not all native plants are equal. So the top 100 is that group of native plants that are the most helpful, in supporting our wildlife. But a couple of examples of wildlife declining. Let's look at birds and let's look at the monarch butterfly. There are 914 species of birds in North America. Nearly half of them are imperiled, according to the State of the Birds report of 2016. That's up from, it was about a fourth in the State of the Birds report in 2014. In 2014, they said 230 species of the 900 were imperiled, but then in 2016 that was revised to say 430 species of the 900 are imperiled. Now, this is not just scientists or professors sitting in their ivory tower making pronouncements. There are a lot of people who love birds. Bird watching clubs go out and they gather data, they see birds, and more often they hear birds, and they're very competitive about this. And we have a lot of good data as to what's happening to birds. So when they say that almost half of North American birds are imperiled, that's not just idle gossip. It is very well supported scientific data. Another species that is declining rapidly is the monarch butterfly. Monarch butterflies have declined by 95% in the last 20 years, and that's not just speculation either, because the monarch is the only butterfly that I'm aware of that it congregates all in one place in Mexico over the winter. So scientists can go and look and estimate how many butterflies they're looking at, and if nothing else, they can tell that the amount of acreage that's covered by monarch butterflies during their overwintering in Mexico has declined by about 95% in the last 20 years. So it's not just speculation to say wildlife is declining. Wildlife is declining. It's a problem, but it's a serious problem that has a beautiful solution. That beautiful solution is the top 100 plants. And the top 100 plants are different in every locality. It's a slightly different list from state to state. It's even slightly different from one area of a state to another. But that's what the top 100 plants is about. It's how to arrest the decline of wildlife and get these trends going in the other direction like they need to. And top 100 plants will not just prevent decline of wildlife, they'll also do things like help make for cleaner water and prevent erosion. So we should pay attention to local extinction, not just global extinction. What do I mean by that? Well, usually when you hear talk of extinction, it's this species has become extinct globally. Global extinction does not happen until a species is locally extinct in many geographic areas. Acre by acre, square mile by square mile, that's how species become extinct. And that's local extinction. So we need to, and ecosystems operate at the local level. Some ecosystems operate on an acre, others within some portion of a square mile. But ecosystems operate locally, and we need to be concerned with the amount of local extinction is going on. And the top 100 plants is a list that is designed to make it easy for you to be part of the solution, starting with your home and local parks. We need to re-engineer our food chains. There's this myth that is prevalent that says we just need to leave nature alone. Nature is out there somewhere. Nature is happy. We need to just leave nature alone. The problem with that thinking is that we have not left nature alone. Even in the remotest areas, our parks, for example, our natural areas, our wildlife preserves have been invaded by 3,300 plant species that we have brought in from other continents. What works for Asia does not work for us, and vice versa. North American plants can often get out of control in Asia. So we have not left nature alone. We need to take a very proactive stance and re-engineer our food chains. The way to do that is to plant the top 100 plants and to remove the invasive species that pose a threat to our native plants. So the top 100 plants are the best plants for North American food chains. And North America is a very broad area that includes many different regions. Every region is a little different. That's why the top 100 list is very important, because I'll be sharing with you the top 100 list for my locality of Louisville, Kentucky, and it's going to be slightly different if you go very far north, very far south, very far east, or very far west. But only within the last 2 years has the data become available and put on a website that anyone can access as to what are the top 100 best plants in your geographic area. All you have to do is put in your zip code. So it's about region by region. We want to plant the top 100 plants. We see plants all around us, but not all plants are created equal. Wherever you are, whether you're at your home, at your office, driving along the highway, at your place of work, you see plants everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's green. It's a rare place where you do not see something that's green. But the problem is not all plants are created equal. Turf grass is not the same. Not all plants are created equal, so the top 100 list is the definitive list for those plants that are best for the wildlife in your region, in your area, your locality, your county. The top 100 plants are the ones that will solve the decline of wildlife. That's because the top 100 plants lie at the very basis of the food chain. The very basis of the food chain is leaf-eating insects. We know from school that the basis of the food chain is herbivores, but some herbivores play only a very small role in the food chain. Deer, for example, really play a very small role in the food chain. They're herbivores, but they play a small role in the food chain. Our leaf-eating insects play a very large role in the food chain, and we'll see a little bit about how that works. But the top 100 plants are the ones that will solve the decline of wildlife if we allow them to. Okay, so what's the next step, or what are the steps that are involved with this? So the steps include, everything's about awareness and action. Everything boils down to awareness and action. So we need to be aware. What are the good plants? The top 100 plants are not only good plants, but they're the best plants. There are good plants that are not in the top 100, but if we plant the first the first few. Even the top 50 is just a very powerful group of plants, because in my geographic area, the top 50 will support 75% of all leaf-eating insects. So we get a lot of bang for our buck by concentrating on the very highest ranking of the good plants. So be aware of what are the good plants. Be aware of what are the bad plants. There are lots of bad plants, there are bad plants are everywhere. The good news is that in any geographic area, yes, theoretically there are hundreds, but if you know about a dozen of them, that's all it takes. In my area, it's bush honeysuckle and winter creeper and privet and English ivy and porcelain berry and Japanese honeysuckle. Knowing just a few of the bad plants will help you look outside, and when you see green, you know that not all green is created equal, so be aware of which are the bad plants. Step number 2, take action. Wherever you are, put good plants in. If you're a homeowner, put some of the good plants in your yard. If you plant a tree, make sure, ask yourself 2 things. One, is this tree anywhere in the top 100? Number 2, if I have a choice between a tree that ranks 75 and a tree that ranks 10, which one do I choose? Ecologically, you would, if your concern is ecology, you're going to choose from among the many beautiful plants that we have in the top 10 or the 20. So take action by planting the good plants, and then take action by removing the bad plants. Find a place in your locality where people are out on Saturday morning removing invasive species. It's every bit as good as going to the gym, and you get to be out in nature and you get to care for our forests. I assure you that the only forests that are healthy today are the ones that are actively, proactively, intentionally cared for, and that means removing the bad plants. The good thing is, when you're dealing with a forest or a woods or a wooded area, that when you remove the bad plants, there are dozens of dormant native plants that are eager to come up if they can just get out from under the cover of these very few bad plants that are ruining the entire forest. So there's 2 steps: awareness and action. And repeat, you take a little action and you learn more, so that means more awareness and more action that you can take. So you've seen this list before, but what are the top 5 plants in my geographic area? Oak trees, including bur oak and pin oak and chestnut oak and shumard oak. So native plums and cherries. The American plum is a very good tree. The black cherry is a very good tree, but make sure they're native. Native willow trees, often short, kind of look more like bushes, and they're not the weeping willow, but make sure you choose native willow trees, not the non-natives. And then there are birch trees, such as the river birch, which is the plant on which the river birch dagger moth grows. So each one of these has a specific list of leaf-eating insects, a specific list of caterpillars that consider this plant home. Number 5, maple trees. Make sure it's native maple trees. Make sure it's not a Norway maple, because that's highly invasive and very bad and very damaging in some areas. So make sure they're native maple trees, such as the silver maple, which is also called the water maple, and the sugar maple. So those are just a taste of what the top 5 plants are. So, steps to saving our wildlife. Here are the steps. Now, I mentioned some steps before, but this is kind of a different way of looking at the steps to taking action. Start with a place. You have to have a place, whether it's your home or a local park. You start with a place, you get permission. If it's your home, you don't need anybody's permission. But if it's a park, get permission to and work with a group. So get permission, identify the plants. If you don't know how to identify plants, join the club, because there are a lot of plants and not everybody knows how to identify them. But there are some great plant identification groups on Facebook. And so identifying plants is not all that hard. In any given area, if you have 10, 15 acres or more, you're going to have maybe a couple dozen native trees, and then maybe 40 or so native plants. So identifying the native plant, it sounds like a lot of work, but get the help of a biologist or a botanist who can just go through and make a list. So identify, and if it's your yard, if it's a quarter acre, eighth of an acre, half acre, they're not that many. So identify the plants that you already have. And I'm not saying go cut. Number 4, remove the bad plants. I'm not saying you have to go cut down all your non-natives right now. It's probably not a good idea because they do provide valuable services, but have a plan going forward for removing the bad plants and replacing them with good ones. Number 4 and number 5 are in order. Many areas, it's just a good idea to go ahead and get rid of the bad plants first, and then number 5, plant the good plants, and then repeat as needed. It's never done. We have to weed the woods. We don't just leave the woods alone. If you're working in a local park or a woodland, or if you're a landowner, a woodland owner, the work is never done, but we have to start, and it's very rewarding work. And number 6, repeat as needed. So those are the steps to saving our wildlife. Start with a place, get permission, identify the plants that are already there, remove the bad plants, plant the good ones, and repeat as needed. For more information, go to top100plants.com or email info@top100plants.com. Thank you very much.